Welcome to the Unique History Channel. Today, we will be doing a chapter reading from Lenin's Jewish Question by Yohanan Petrovsky-Shtern. First, we will start by reading the jacket, the information on the book jacket, and then we'll jump into reading the first two chapters. This is the first book to confront the question of Lenin's Jewish roots. In it, Yohanan Petrovsky-Shtern eloquently puts to rest the long-standing debate over Lenin's ancestry and expands our understanding of the Russian and Soviet handling of the Jewish question. The evidence is indisputable that Lenin had Jewish relatives. The author shows, and he examines, how family members did their best to eliminate their Jewish identities by converting to Orthodox Christianity and adopting Russian imperial values. Lenin's Jewish question explores the consequences for Lenin himself and for those who uncovered his Jewish genealogical connection after his death. Petrovsky-Shtern concludes that Lenin cared little about the Jewish origin of his Marxist colleagues and that he manipulated the Jewish question in Russia for his own immediate political goals. The author also reveals the racist bias against Jews of leading Russian Bolsheviks and Russian far-right ideologists. Okay, now we will go to Chapter 1, From Nowhere to Zhitomir. In the beginning, there was a scandal. It took place in January 1841 in the civil court of Zhitomir, the central town of the Volhynia province of the Russian Empire. Finkelstein, a Jewish woman dwelling in Zhitomir, sued a man named Blank, or perhaps Blank sued Finkelstein. An unpaid debt worth several thousand rubles was at stake. In the courtroom, the litigation turned into an animated exchange. Blank's allegations and her own plight as an impoverished Jewish woman drove Finkelstein mad. She turned to scolding, expressing herself in incompatible Yiddish. She yelled at Blank, a miserable Jew who allowed his sons to accept Christianity and become Russian Orthodox. Then she dubbed Christianity a pagan creed, obviously exaggeration from her side, and claimed that Blank's son, now pagans, would die like dogs. Finkelstein concluded that her reprimand be confirming that Blank, a Jew, would also die like a dog. The archival document unfortunately omitted some of Finkelstein's insights into the bright future of the Blank family. Finkelstein's rich Yiddish idiom is lost to us. But even if we could have captured Finkelstein's picturesque speech, it would have made no sense to the Russian Orthodox court clerks. None of them, the judge, his assistant, and a court scribe knew any Yiddish. Yet, besides the litigants, there was at least one person in the court who knew some Yiddish. This person, a visit from St. Petersburg, whose name remained unidentified, turned to Finkelstein without a question and reproach. "Madam Finkelstein," he said aloud, "you have no reason to rebuke Mr. Blank because his son, Alexander Dmitrievich Blank, became a medical doctor in St. Petersburg, merited the rank of the Russian state official, and married a lady who was none other than the sister of Karl Ivanovich Grosov himself." So far, Moshko Blank was just listening, but when he heard the name of his son's father-in-law, state clerk in the capital city of St. Petersburg, he could restrain himself no longer. If one can believe his own description of the event, Blank admitted that at a particular moment he felt very much like splitting straight into Madame Finkelstein's face. And yet, the gentleman that he was, he managed to pull himself together and set his pat on the floor near Finkelstein. Then he said out loud in Russian that no one should spit on such words as hers. This incident sealed his fate. The Russian court clerks could tolerate Finkelstein's Yiddish curses, as they could neither make head nor tail of them, but they clearly witnessed Blank splitting and heard him dropping a clear-cut comment in Russian. This was interpreted as verbal verbal confirmation of his public offense. What they did understand without articulation is that they considered Blank's act wanton and brazen, had Blank arrested on the spot, and condemned him to imprisonment for insulting the court district, a Russian imperial official institution. The members of the court and the entire Russian legal system, broken and depressed, Blank filed a complaint with Lieutenant General Bykov, Governor General of Kiev, Poltava, and the Volhynia provinces. Blank related the entire episode in detail, accused Finkelstein of infuriating him, bemoaned his fate as a prisoner who had already spent 9 weeks in confinement, praised the political correctness of his sons, who had accepted the mainstream religion of the empire, and claimed innocence. This episode in the life of Moshko Blank could be just another unimportant vignette in the story of Jews in the Russian Empire, if not for 2 significant details: the attitude of a shtetl Jew from the Pale of Jewish settlement towards converts from Judaism, and the fate of the Blanks. The Pale of Jewish settlement, or simply the Pale as it was usually called, was populated in the early 1800s by some 1 million Jews. It represented a territory of 15 provinces, which the Russian Empire later acquired in the late 18th century as a result of 3 partitions of Poland. Previously not allowed into Russia, Jews now found themselves under Russian rule in the empire's western and southwestern borderlands. Although they were the Russian Tsar's subject, most Jews were not allowed to reside out of the Pale of Jewish settlement before the era of Alexander the Great's Great Reform, except for several categories of guild merchants, the wealthiest members of the trade estate, exiled convicts, and retired soldiers. St. Petersburg, where the 2 sons of Moshko Blank had settled, was Russia's northern capital, far beyond the Pale, outside the geographical realm, associated with Jews far from the Jewish community, in no Jews' land. Madame Finkelstein considered moving there and accepting Christianity as an act of treason, a betrayal of the shtetl values of the forefathers' heritage, and what she would probably call Yiddishkeit, the Jewish tradition. She thought Blank deserved nothing but a curse, and she articulated her condemnation with a gusto. Moshko, or to be precise, Moshe Istavakovich Blank, was of a different opinion. As we shall see in chapter 2, Moshko considered the Jewish shtetl dull and empty, his fellow Jews backward fanatics and their Judaic traditions corrupt and nonsensical. From Moshko Blank's viewpoint, Jews were profoundly unpatriotic, arrogant, and subversive. Take, for example, Madame Finkelstein's aversion towards the Enlightenment, or, God forbid, the Christianized Jews who made it to the capital of the empire and became doctors. On the contrary, he, Moshko Blank, was a loyal subject, ready to serve the Tsar and the fatherland, and in the future, the Russian God, too. What we knew about Blank suggests that he worshipped the Russian Empire, a mighty empire, its religion, its language, its education, and its bureaucracy, just because it embodied power. He loved what he imagined as a powerful imperial Russia, and he hated the Jews, those sheepish losers. Blank shared the values of the Russian petty clerks and the mid-rank bureaucrats who dreamed about a promotion to the state service, as Madame Bovary dreamed of Paris. What he did not dare do in the courtroom to Madame Finkelstein, he had done to her relatives many times before. He spat in the face of the Finkelsteins, his fellow Jews, and quite literally. Moshko Blank was the father of Alexander Dmitrievich Blank, whose daughter, Maria Alexandrovna Blank, gave birth to Vladimir Ulyanov, better known as Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. Among Russian historians, there would be some who portrayed Lenin as a version of Moshko Blank, both as if were shared similar hatred towards their own people. Of course, blank could not take the role of the great-grandfather of the Russian Revolution. This position is already occupied by another baptized Jew, Karl Marx. Yet, as Lenin's maternal great-grandfather and a skeleton in the Russian Bolshevik closet, Moscow deserves scrutiny. To betray Moscow blank, one has to place him back in his native Statenov, where he lived as a Jew, and then he moved to his house in zhitomir, where he died as a Christian. The old town of Constantine in the Russian Starokonastikvik appears as Konstantin Yashan in the Hebrew records of the town's Jewish community. It is situated in a small triangular formed by the merging rivers Sluch and Ikopot. The town emerged as a village around 1525, and around 1561, it was sold into private Polish possession. Initially, it belonged to and was named after Count Konstanty Ostrogiski, or Konstantin Ostrokozy, one of the wealthiest Polish magnates, appointed a palatine of Kiev and Volhynia lands as compensation for his service to the crown. Constantine erected towers around the town and connected them with ramparts and fortified them with guns, hung heavy gates around the town's entrances. He also invited Tatars, Poles, and Jewish people to settle locally and engage in trade. In 1637, Polish King Władysław V granted town Magdeburg law. Starokonstantinov dwellers, predominantly Jews, obtained the privilege to establish regular annual fairs and deal in wine, liquor, mead, and beer brewing. Initially, the owner did not overtax his subjects. They paid 1 grosz per wagon and 2 per store during the fairs. A Tatar invasion demolished the town in 1618, and the Cossack Revolution devastated in 1648. And yet, by the end of the 17th century, Starokonstantinovo rose from its own ashes and rebuilt its unsophisticated trade. In 1766, Stanislav Lombrowski and August Tsar Troitsky established new fairs, furthering the local mercantile economy. Because of the vicinity of such an extraordinary important place as Berdichev, a center of international trade, Starokonstantinov remained a small and undeveloping trading town. It was almost entirely made of wood, with houses coated in clay, stoves made of bricks, and roofs covered by char shingles. No wonder in the 18th and 19th century fires repeatedly destroyed the town. As an article of trade itself, the town changed hands numerous times. Starokonstantinov had been passed to Countess Razukia, a section of the Razuki and Lombrowski landlord families. After the third position of Poland, Razuskia, a number of other Polish magnates in a nearby private town, sank deeper and deeper in the debt. She loved the luxury and amused herself in Vienna and Paris. She amassed debt of about 213 million rubles. Her son, a composer, an adventurer, and an Orientalist, also enjoyed life. He spent 2 million zloty just on his 70 Arabian stallions. In 1818, Razukwa arranged a glamorous ball to please the Russian Tsar. Alexander I had a carpet cover the spread over the muddy Starokostnyev streets and lavishly fed the quartered Russian troops there with free mead, vodka, and meat. To compensate herself, she charged her subjects exorbitant taxes and petitioned the Tsar to establish a special commission in charge of her debts. This was not to the liking of the newly allied Russian administration. After the Polish Rebellion of 1830 to 1831, the authorities intended to make Starokonstantislav, as well as many other private Polish towns, formerly Russian, economically a crown asset, and politically an imperial district center. Russian state hierarchs took plans to remove the town from Polish private status and place it under the control of the Russian state treasury. They went so far as to discuss the drastic need of purchasing the town from Razuka, a measure that would likely allow her to pay the debts to her multiple creditors, and the town to contribute directly to the Russian imperial treasury. The commission embezzled about 500,000 rubles and did little to settle Razuka's matters, leaving her to die in poverty and distress. In the late 1850s, the town was auctioned and partially bought by the state and partially by Countess Anna Ambulik. Moscow Blank might not have known the details of the Russian-Polish dispute over Statenov, but he certainly knew that his town was predominantly Jewish and Polish with a slowly growing Russian presence. Power, wealth, and influence were spread unevenly among the three groups. Starokonstantislav had in the 1830s had about 5,483 males and 5,483 female urban dwellers. The impoverished and embedded gentry comprised of 99 men and 84 women, mostly of Catholic of Polish origin, were no longer able to rejoice in Polish political and military grandeur. The town had a Capuchin monastery with 26 monks, a remainder of the vanishing Catholic domination over Eastern European lands. The Russian Orthodox Church, previously providing service mostly to the peasants, now firmly established itself as a legitimate president in the town. Out of the 4 Starokonstantislav Russian Orthodox churches, 2 were sequestered from the Catholic and reconstructed in the Byzantine Christian architectural style. 13 families of the Russian Orthodox clergy settled there and made themselves available to the local urban population. Russia modestly marketed itself in presence in town in familiarity. It allowed some 56 retired soldiers and their 67 female relatives to settle locally, 91 internal guards, and further 31 female family members also lived predominantly in the town as registered dwellers. The town had a small unit of 49 cantonists, Russian soldiers, children serving in the military battalions with temporarily among the dwellers as a cheap labor force. Starokonstantinov was a typical town, a shtetl with a marketplace, establishing trading days, a well-developed liquor industry, and a rudimentary urban self-rule. However, it also seemed the most probably in the eyes of Moscow Blank no more than a village of peasants of 3 groups. Most of them Russian Orthodox, lived on the outskirts of the town, 109 male and 118 female. Among paid their dues to the state, 886 and 954 respectively to the gentry, and respectively 34 and 43 to the Russian Orthodox priests. The town had 1,400 houses, 756 of them belonging to Russian Orthodox peasants, 158 to the Catholic former gentry, and 448 to Jews. 1,500 residential houses might seem an impressive number for a small town, yet only 4 of them were made of stone. Most peasants' houses were village huts. The houses stood along the river. The dwellers poured all of their refuse into the water. The streets were unpaved and not illuminated, even in the market square. Several Jewish butcheries stood at the very heart of the town. In the market square, The incoming traders sold manufactured goods, groceries, dairy products from wagons that served as storage containers, stores and counters. Cows and goats wandered through the damp streets between the houses, which had no separating fences. If one adds the constant soft smell of manure and the reek of butcheries facing the market square, one can easily imagine the bouquet of Statenov, a small town and village at the same time. Statenov did not change much throughout the 19th century. Considered the impressions of Zutz, a broad-minded officer of the 45th Azov, His Imperial Majesty Grand Duke Boris Infantry Regiment. He wrote in the 1880s, "We know that Statenov is a dirty beyond measure, but if we bother ourselves to learn for any reasons to the situation, we'd probably find out that the Jews, whom one usually blames, have nothing to do with it. To drive through the streets is a real challenge, as there is no pavement. Stones once paving the road have long sunk into the soil. When it is raining, they do nothing to prevent movement." He added, "The sanitary condition of the town is highly unfavorable regarding the health of the town dwellers." While local Russian Orthodox peasants shaped Statenov rural outlook, Jews contributed to making the town more urban. They built houses as inns and taverns for travelers. Early in the 19th century, there was only one Christian merchant of the third guild, the lowest level of the trading elite, registered in Statenov, and 12 Jewish. Plus, there was a second guild merchant, the second wealthiest position in trading estate, also a Jew, most likely David Steinberg, a tycoon according to the highest economic standards at the time. In 1796, Statenov Jews established the Kalal, a local Jewish communal umbrella organization, electing Steinberg, the wealthiest person in town, among its 16 elders, as well as Moscow Berman, a guild merchant who traded in salt. If one adds the number of some 102 Jewish elite family members, one would have a good size of the upper middle class Jewry in town. Indeed, they represented a bit more than 1% of the town's Jews, while the Christian urban dwellers, in addition to peasants, amounted to 300 male, 286 female. Statenov boasted 7,000 Jewish dwellers, 3,625 male, 3,688 female, 67% of the town's population. The Jews contributed to the lion's share of the town's economy, still mediocre and undeveloped. Excluding grain and crop sales, the town yielded an income of 24,000 silver rubles to the Ryazusky treasury annually. Traditionally engaged in business such as leasing inns, fishing ponds, meat and wine, breweries and mills, but not into agricultural labor, which was not allowed to them. Jews paid 16,000 silver rubles to Ryazutska for the leasing privileges. They established about 46 inns in the district, together with other town dwellers. They paid Senez a rental payment for their own estate of about 8,000 silver rubles per year. Since Jews owned 1/3 of all the houses in town, they probably contributed about 1/3 of the rental sum. If this is true, they, 67% of the population, were responsible for at least 75% of the town income. The wealthiest among them made their money in trade. Isaac Grunberg, Abraham Montina, and Ios Kaplan purchased merchandise in the Austrian Brody wholesale and retailed in Zhitomir, Berchev, and Starokonstantinov. Yet, One should not overestimate Jewish personal well-being. While about 3 peasants lived in a hut, there were about 15 Jews per house. Unlike peasants, Jews were free tax-paying subjects, although many of them could hardly make ends meet, let alone pay their taxes. Moscow Blank could pay his taxes, and he thought to join the Starokonstantinov economic elite, yet living in a town with 2/3 Jewish population, most of whom lived from hand to mouth, was a bit too much for him. He particularly disliked the overwhelmingly traditional outlook of the town. In the mid-19th century, Starokonstantinov had 25 prayer homes with about 1,300 men regularly attended. Women were routinely not counted by the Tsar's inspectors. 5 officially registered private teachers took care of 26 students of Talmud in several yeshivas, low-profile Talmudic academies. There were 263 children attending 21 Jewish schools. As there were no specially designed premises, 10 to 15 students had to squeeze into the dining room of the teacher's house closer to the heating stove. Starokonstantinov Jews held traditional learning in high esteem. Hebrew books such as Homiletics, Torah with commentaries, legal treasuries, responsa, and ethical Musar compositions in Kabbalah were costly, about 70 rubles, and yet Jews spent their meager income to purchase books. At that time, people bought books to read, not just to keep. A wealthy guild merchant from the nearby town of Radisov informed the central authorities that there were about 1 million Hebrew books in the entire Volhynia province, and in Starokonstantinov alone there were about 20,000 books. Even if he exaggerated considerably, his estimate implied that every male Jew had 2 or 3 books at his disposal. This is fascinating, given that a Hebrew book amounted to the price of a goat. At any rate, when Russian clerks were taking inventory of Jewish educational establishments in the 1820s, they did not find Jews attending Russian schools or any established Russian state schools for Jewish children, an eloquent testimony to the traditional outlook of the Jewish community, untouched by what the Russian administration called obrazovancy, secular education. The situation hardly changed in a quarter of a century. In 1846, none of the Starokonstantinov elementary schools with their government-certified teachers had the Russian language in its curriculum. And in 1847, there was no Talmud Torah, an elementary school usually supported by the government, where secular subject and the Russian language were taught. Instead, there were about 54 mid-level heders serving 412 students, 77 elementary heders serving about 1,500 students, and 162 private tutors taking care of about 600 more advanced students. Only in the 1860s would Starokonstantinov Jews agree to establish a new type of Jewish school with the Russian language and secular subjects. Yet out of the 25 enrolled students, only 10 attended regularly. Moscow Blank considered assimilation with the dominant Russian culture a redeeming escape from the uncivilized and rustic Jewish environment, filled, as he thought, with the obscene rites and superstitions. No wonder he dreamt of a town with less Jewish tradition and more Russian administration. Starokonstantinov Jews were a profoundly divided community, and not only economically. Like many other shtetl dwellers elsewhere, they disagreed about which prayer house was warmer and whose tavern the wine was sweeter. They competed with one another over visitors to stay at an inn or customers coming to purchase a bolt of fabric. They took sides in the ongoing quarrel among the wealthiest merchants in town and bargained over the retail prices of pickles. They made it an issue with the Kalahal elders if they had to host 3 officials of the Russian infantry regiment built into town, while their neighbor had to only accommodate 2. They competed for influence over the Jewish community by investing in the town's urban infrastructure. Thus, for an example, a non-Jewish observer praised the activities of Israel Epstein and Adam Karanowski, 2 local Jewish philanthropists, who in the mid-19th century sponsored the establishment of the town Jewish hospital for 20 people, a public library, and the first secular Jewish school. Indeed, Jews also squabbled about whose Hasidic master had greater powers, which preacher was better, and whose son knew by heart more pages from the Talmud. In addition to synagogue goers and Talmud learners, the town had its own Jewish smugglers in good standing with the Russian custom officers, Jewish drunkards known to the local innkeepers for their debauchery, and Jewish vagabonds. As homeowners believed prone to stealing, Jewish smugglers regularly paid Konstantinov court and custom clerks a certain amount of their revenues either in cash or in coffee, vodka, sugar, or colonial tea. Those who did not share their income from the contraband trade became victims of arbitrary business of local courts. An anonymous informer tells a fascinating story of the Star Konstantinov chief district clerk Konstantin Grick, who walked drunk through the town streets, supported by 2 tipsy Jewish prostitutes, followed by a Jewish orchestra performing the Koshchev March, watched by dozens of merry town dwellers, Jews and non-Jews alike, mockingly shouting, "Hats off, hurrah." However, motley the town population, Jewish outcasts, and local town dwellers shared alike values such as warm dwelling, healthy children, loyal customers, and hot food. But particularly they valued Berken fun Hasidic, the blessing of a Hasidic master whose extraordinary mystical powers and proximity to God were believed to secure for Jews all those things put together. Hasidim emerged as a movement of religious enthusiasm and captured the minds thousands of Jews, male and female alike. Hasidim were ubiquitous and very popular in the Volhynia and Star Konstantinov. Jews supported new Hasidic leaders who uplifted their followers from all walks of life by preaching a new message. Hasidim taught that one could cleave to God also through regular prayer and not only Talmudic study. They preached that even such lowly creatures as women had a divine spark and deferred spiritual uplift, quite unusual view for the overtly misogynistic Jewish and non-Jewish society. Both wealthy and file-rank Jews sought to help with advice and a blessing of the Hasidic leaders. The Jews considered the course of the Taskim, a New Jerusalem temple, their table with an altar, their leftovers of the remnants of the sacred offerings, and their words a revelation of divine. The Star Konstantinov merchant Pinkus Brumberg, proprietor of the zhitomir military hospital, wrote in a letter from St. Petersburg to his wife, where he owned enormous wealth and influence exclusively to the spiritual protection of Rabbi Israel of Rushkin, known as in Yiddish as Ritzener Rebbe, probably the most influential Hasidic master in the Pale of Settlement in the 1820s to 1830s. By spiritual protection, Bromberg implied that Israel from Ruzhin interceded on this Bromberg's behalf with the Almighty, prayed for Bromberg's prosperity and success. Loyal to the Russian Empire and to his Star Konstantinov Hasidic customs, Bloomberg wrote a green civil suit when meeting Russian ministers in St. Petersburg, but on Shabbat, even in the Russian capital, he put on his straw metal around Hasidic fur hat. Moscow blank despised Hasidim. As will be shown in chapter 2, Moscow blank exposed them to the government as subversives, not only because he took them for charlatans, but also because he hated to see representatives of the Jewish economic elite supporting them. The Jews of Starokonstantinov prayed in their multiple prayer houses for the high holidays. However, they gathered in the town's main synagogues, in which they generally referred to as Bekinish Hadignu, the Great Synagogue, as reflected in the title page of the communal records. This synagogue was a pompous stone building covered with tin. It embodied resistance against the encroaching rites and traditions of the Hasidim, forbidding the usage of Hasidic liturgy and Hasidic prayer books premeditated with the Kabbalah. However, the elders of the Great Synagogue were forced to be politically correct. A variety of Hasidic societies surrounded their steadfast Lithuanian-style religious institution. The elders permitted Hasidim to use the synagogue as a depository for their valuable religious artifacts. The followers of Hasidic and Kabbalistic rites gathered mostly at the local prayer house, at the Hasidic house of study, dubbed Mishkaver Kloitz, after the late wealthy butcher Yosef Mishkever. In addition to newly emerged Hasidic prayer houses, there were at least 5 Hasidic-oriented volunteer institutions, such as the Eternal Light Society, the Shelter to Travelers, the Mishnah and the Talmud Study, Holy Men Society, and the Great House Mishnah Study Society. All of them utilized Kabbalistic rituals and promoted Kabbalah learning, and all of them were engaged in philanthropy. Some of them sponsored the visit to town to none of other than the famous Hasidic Rebbe Avron Yeshova Heschel, residing permanently in nearby Medjov, who blessed the societies and signed their minutes. The members of the societies represented the town intellectual elite, the most theologically educated group of Star-Konstantinov Jews. Moscow blank, however, was never one of them. The Great Synagogue and the Hasidic Great Prayer House represented the town's 2 main religious powers. The third was socio-economic, the Kollel, the town Jewish communal umbrella organization responsible for taxation, philanthropy, vital records, and after the introduction of the personal conscription for Jews in 1827, draft list. The Starokonstantinov Kollel was composed of 4 elders and headed by the guild merchant Moshkov Berman, a wholesale salt dealer from the local economic elite. The Jewish umbrella organization was pietistic in form, pragmatic in function, and mercantile in substance. Members of the Kollel also acted as heads of the Hevra Kaddish, the Brule Society, the wealthiest and most influential Jewish traditional institution in town. The Burial Society distributed donations of the town shopkeepers evenly among the Hasidic and non-Hasidic institutions, according to its nearly arranged list of town donors, recipients, preserved in the minutes of the Great Synagogue. The interaction between Hasidic and non-Hasidic institutions in Star-Konstantinov suggests that the local leadership found ways to incorporate religious relativism of the pietistic Hasidism into the town's religious mainstream. When Moscow Blank decided to go against the Hasidim, he thought he was fighting the obscurants and their obscure Kabbalistic beliefs, while he was really going against the Kollel, the Great Synagogue, and the Hasidic groups, in a word, the entire community. And we as will she, as we will shall see momentarily. The community, although divided along cultural, social, and economic lines, responded to Moscow unanimously with shared hatred towards the informer. The worst of plagues. Jews in the Pale of Settlement were less afraid of the danger of the personal conscription to the Russian army than they were afraid of fires, of which were a seasonal disaster in the Pale Settlement. Archival documents from Volyana, Poldov, and Kiev provinces testify that in the first half of the 19th century, fires were catastrophic for shtetl dwellers and for the urban administration. In the 1820s, 1840s, fires left hundreds of Jewish and Christian families homeless in Balta, Gasin, Lichich, Litvin, Shtepelkova, Shkoldakov, and dozens of other towns in the Pale of Settlement. The 1843 fire in Statenov destroyed 21 Christian and 9 Jewish homes, and also a Jewish bathhouse, hospital, and butchery. It took the 1842 fire in Menezhevov about 45 minutes away to demolish 27 Christian and 21 Jewish homes in town. Stormy weather and drought in 1841 caused a fire in the town of Makhanova that demolished 4 brick and 23 wooden houses, a school building, and a town magistrate. A battalion of the Sakhalin Regiment, reinforced by the Makhanova Fire Command and police, would do nothing to check the disaster. Sometimes the fires destroyed entire cities. A few years before the disastrous 1808 blaze in Starknazov, a fire in the neighboring town of Lusk destroyed 96 stone houses, 200 wooden houses, 23 stone houses, and 25 stone basements, 50 wooden basements, and 222 storage huts, causing damage assessed at about 215,000 silver rubles. Another fire hit loose during the dry and windy summer of 1848. In addition to wooden and stone houses, all the town granaries and 2 sturdy Catholic monasteries, the Berdine and Dominican, also burned. The provincial authorities had to resettle residents in a nearby village and petitioned the imperial capital to allow the use of lumber from state-owned forests for new homes. Starokonstantinov saw a number of devastating fires, such as in 1709 to 1710 and 1818, and years later when Moscow Blank was already residing in the Volhynia province center of Zhitomir. On August 3rd, 1836, another fire hit Starokonstantinov. The fire spread from the chimney from the roof of Zia Toporovsky's house, consuming the straw in his house, and then jumped to 3 nearby Jewish houses, razing them and burning the pillars supporting the iron gates, and the gates fell, killing 2 Jews. Scared and suspicious, Starokokosium dwellers established night guards and brought to trial the 2 vagabond suspects, suspected of having set the fire but could not prove their guilt. More fires followed. In 1844, a blaze swallowed through the building of the Magistrate and Crown Assets Management, Jewish stalls in the marketplace crucial to the town's economy and philanthropy. Most of the town's wooden houses, about 170 Jews lost between 50 and 200 rubles of property each, and about 120 Jews lost about 302,000 rubles, and 30 landlords and clerks lost about 600 rubles worth of property. The chief of the local police calculated the overall damage at about 150,000 rubles with the astronomical sum of that time. Minister of the Interior, Lev Perovsky, was so upset by the figures that he ordered an immediate compensation of every town dweller of 3 silver rubles each, and freed the town from payments and with no taxes to the treasury for a couple of years. Fires demolished the shtetl long before pogroms and revolutions came to the fore. After their dwellings burned, many Jews resettled into bigger town, district, or province centers, had more stone buildings, better equipped firemen, and more efficient town administrations, in addition to better sanitary conditions and job opportunities. These provided better protections against seasonal summer fires, but they could not offer the protection from the radical reforms of Nicholas I had in store for Jews. In 1827, Nicholas I introduced military conscription for Jews, turning the draft into one of the most painful issues for the local community. What the state administration designed in order to better integrate Jews into the fabric of society, Jews in the Pale dubbed as Grezri, Yiddish for calamity or divine punishment. Statenov became probably the only Russian shtetl in which the communal reaction to the conscription scared the government out of its wits and led to establish draconian measures to nip it in the bud to what it considered public disobedience. In late September 1827, 2 to 3 weeks after the law on the personal conscription of Jews was issued, it became clear that the Tsar had no desire to abolish the draft, contrary to what Jewish deputies expected when bringing to the Tsar's highest officials, and the local administrators and Jewish communal elders would have to implement the law. Police officer Kurowski went to confirm with his Kollel elders, who gathered for this purpose in the house of Iozan Garstein, Ida Klapp Rubenstein, Shmuel Land, Abraham Konovsky, Shemekel Zinkanovsky, and 2 other Jewish guild merchants. Members of the town's economic elite were also present. Rank-and-file Jews began gathering around the Kollel house in big crowds. They realized that fundraising aimed at preventing conscription had been doomed, and that every last penny they collected for their Jewish deputies in St. Petersburg has been spent on vain. While none of the town Jewish elite came out to calm them down, the mob began vandalizing houses, inns, and stores belonging to the Jewish economic oligarchy. The town head then ordered the police to disperse the crowds and restore order. Some ran, but others did not. In the end, 6 Jews were arrested, none of whom associated with the Kollaters or merchants. Later, the town head asked for additional army units to be deployed locally to prevent further clashes. The authorities ordered an investigation, allowed the local administrators to court-martial anyone who persisted, and eventually caused the disturbances in the town nothing short of anti-conscription rebellion. One should see the Statenov revolt in a different light. Certainly it was not an organized attempt to active resistance against the extensions of personal conscription. Most likely the indigenous $12 targeted the Jewish communal, that is, economic elite, rather than the Tsarist authorities. In the mid-1820s, Starokonstantinople Jews, as well as thousands of Jews throughout the Pale settlement, readily gave their last pennies to support a group of Jewish deputies that the communities had dispatched to St. Petersburg. The deputies planned to use their leverage with Russian state officials to prevent the introduction of personal draft for the Jews. Once their plan failed and the law on conscription was passed, ordinary Jews were left without money and with the prospect of seeing their sons drafted into the Russian Imperial Army. They knew that a Jewish guild merchant or Kollalter would do his best to help his own son or nephew avoid conscription. Shtetl Jews in mass were deeply opposed to sending their sons to the army, but they were no rebels. They had neither the power nor the foolhardy courage to challenge the authorities. Shtetl Jews could appear in blanks denunciations as disloyal elements, arrogant subjects, and subversive fanatics, only secure distance of only from the secure distance of the crown town of Zhitomir. Zhitomir became, for Masha Blank, everything that Statenov was not. Unlike Statenov, Zhitomir had never been a muddy, flat shtetl. On the contrary, it boasted its beautiful urban landscape, and it was dry, situated on the river Tvev. Zhitomir went up and down the picturesque hills, mostly of quartz and granites. Like Kiev, Minsk, and Vilna, it was most important imperial administrative town, established perhaps in the times of the Kievan Rus. Zhitomir had long been a provincial center in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The town had benefited from the Magdeburg laws since the mid-15th century, and in the 17th century it became a Catholic educational center. The Russian administration confirmed its central status in the Volhynia province after 1793 Polish partition. On the eve of the war with Napoleon, the town hosted two field marshals, Mikhail Kutuzov and later Peter Bargan. I can't read it. For a visitor from St. Petersburg, Zhitomir looked provincial indeed, but it was a central town. The Polish presence was quite palatable. From the early 19th century, the town could boast a robust stone building, St. John of Dukla Catholic Seminary, an impressive edifice, St. Sophia Cathedral, and the set of the Baroque stone buildings forming the St. Bernine Monastery. Early in the 19th century, the Russian central government established Zhitomir as a number of Volhynia province administration institutions such as the district and land courts, town offices, a trade management office, a prison, a district school, and a magistrate. To house these institutions, the administration by the 1820s commissioned and constructed stone buildings in the Russian classical style. In the 1820s to 1830s, there appeared in the town center a number of pompous Russian Baroque Orthodox churches, also from stone, including the Church of the Holy Cross. In the mid-19th century, the town commissioned the construction of a brick post office buildings, including a hotel, stalls, cabin facilities, and facilities for the post office management. Despite its old-fashioned Catholic buildings and the 43 manufactories in the possession of the Polish magistrates, Zhitomir was of unequivocally Russian. The libraries of the civil clerks and the uniforms of the town military garrison marked the presence of the Russian imperial bureaucracy. Unlike Moscow Blank's previous dwelling place, Zhitomir in the 1810s was much less Jewish. Jews made up 1/3 of the population, in contrast to their predominance in Starokonstantinov. Jewish merchants were less of a presence, constituting about 25% of all of Zhitomir's merchants. Seeking to enhance the town economy and improve its urban outlook, the imperial capital, St. Petersburg, created premises to attract the well-to-do in Zhitomir and suppress it with what it could to what it considered the unruly, uncontrolled, highly competitive, burgeoning, and influential nearby town of Berdichev. Berdichev was at the time a major trading center in the Pale, situated 40 miles south of Zhitomir, and still a shtetl, a private town in the possession of Count Matvey Razidi. To elevate one town at the expense of another, the Russian administration investigated a major ongoing clash between Zhitomir, where all the administration's offices were situated, and Berdichev, which had neither trade management offices nor a magistrate. More than 100 Christian and Jewish merchants appealed to the central government, asking it to establish in Berdichev town magistrate offices. They complained that each time they need to make tax arraignments, renew certifications, obtain trading permits, or engage in litigation, they had to travel to Zhitomir, to whose magistrate the town of Berdichev was subsumed. They claimed to represent about 1,000 Berdichev trading Jews who had to spend about 10 rubles for the round trip to Zhitomir, in addition to expenditures to Zhitomir itself. Trading townsmen and merchants spent about 20,000 rubles a year on these trips without any benefit to their own town economy, which was detrimental to Berdichev. The government implied that it was interested in amicable settlement between the two towns and turned to the Zhitomir Jews for their opinions. The latter acknowledged that they would lose enormously, and should the government agree to make Berdichev administrationally independent, the Russian administration faked benevolence toward Zhitomir Jews and rejected the petition of the Berdichev merchants. While the war between the towns continued for several years, bureaucrats from St. Petersburg and Kiev continued to tactically favor Zhitomir. They did not care much about Berdichev's Jewish merchants, who, by the way, contributed annually about 123,000 silver rubles to the town treasury. The authorities wanted to preserve Zhitomir's central administration status without losing a solid part of the revenues from the Berdichev Jews. The situation led well-to-do Jews to move to Zhitomir. Moscow Guberman and Yakov Galperin, Jewish tycoons from Berdichev, moved their headquarters to Zhitomir. Second Guild merchant Vani Stock, proprietor to the army and leaseholder of the production and sale of vodka, also settled there. Like Moscow Blank, Pinkes Brumberg moved his family from Statenov to Zhitomir, where he prior to one of the biggest military hospitals, and by 1830 Zhitomir boasted a sizable Jewish elite providing services to the Russian state bureaucracy. Staff Dr. Trachtenberg, a Jew, served for 13 years to the Zhitomir magistrate until 1833, when St. Petersburg ordered local administration institutions to get rid of Jews who held office. Wealthy Jewish entrepreneurs and guild merchants served as leaseholders to the Zhitomir post offices. Leb Brodsky provided 72 horses, Fivel Gishman 33, and Benjamin Ratner 28. Zhitomir's Jewish merchants were so convinced that they were useful to the state that in 1828 they dared petition the central administration to be exempt from conscription. Even the crime in Zhitomir was of white-collar type. It entailed the thoughtful and well-organizing counterfeits of Russian silver coins carefully crafted from soldiers' buttons rather than the violent robbery or reckless smuggling. St. Petersburg used Zhitomir as a testing ground for the new state policies of Jewish reform. By the late 1830s, the Tsarist administration had shut down all the printing presses in the Pale to prevent publication of what it considered harmful books, that is to say, of Hasidic and Kabbalistic content. The only two publishing houses the administration allowed to remain in Vilna and Zhitomir, the brothers Shapiro, former owners of the much-acclaimed Schwalta Press, offered the highest bid to the state auction, which, by winning permission to establish their printing press in Zhitomir, where they settled permanently. Their 7 presses, including tens of thousands of books annually, created an entire generation of Jewish and Christian printers working together in what was, for 30 years, the biggest Jewish publishing enterprises in Europe. The Zhitomir Press contributed directly to the establishment and maintenance of new state schools for Jews, about 4,000 silver rubles annually. Later, in 1840, the authorities established a rabbinical seminary in Zhitomir, a center for forging crown rabbis, a new type of loyal, docile, secular-oriented, and Russian-speaking Jewish clerics responsible for vital statistics and reporting directly to the government. Although in disfavor with local traditional Jews, the school attracted illustrious Moshkaliv representatives of the Jewish Enlightenment such as Yaakov Eichenbaum, Abraham Ber Glodeber, Chaim Solonsky, a mathematician, astronomer, calculator designer, and Hebrew poet, served as the seminary director. In addition to some crown rabbis, the seminary produced a number of outstanding Jewish writers and journalists, publishers and scholars, the creme de la creme of the Russian Jewish intelligentsia. Lev and Ishak and Mendy Mulcair Shram included. In the 1860s, following the policy of turning Jews into useful subjects of the empire, the authorities supported the establishment of the Zhitomir Jewish Vocational School, the first of its type in the Russian Empire. The Zhitomir Jewish community was much more home of the Russian authorities, the Russian language, and yet it was also, by and large, traditional. When the rabbinical seminary appeared in town, quite close to the central market, the local Jewish community was scandalized by the seminary's non-traditional and non-observant character to the extent that it forbade trade merchants to attend seminary prayer services, considered treifai, unfit, unbecoming a good Jew. There were also some Hasidim in Zhitomir, for example, the followers and admirers of Zeev Wolf, a prominent Hasidic master, a discipliner colleague of Israel ben Eliezer. There was a small Hasidic prayer house called the Kloizev, which hosted a voluntary Talmud study society. Most likely, the prayer house was named after Dov Bir, the Maggid of Mezirich, a close disciple of Baal Shem Tova. Its members considered themselves followers of Rabbi Mordecai, most likely Mordecai Twersky of the Chernobyl dynasty of Hasidim. In one of his Red Cavalry stories, Isaac Babel portrayed Zhitomir as a morbidly moribund Jewish town, with its Jewish dwellings empty like a morgue, and Hasidic Rabbi Multili sitting at a table surrounded by liars and the possessed. Both for the Russian administration, Zhitomir was a town of useful Jews, not of senseless Hasidim, considering the following example. At the time when Moscow Blank was writing to the Tsar, Zhitomir smiths, members of the guild, were complaining to their Jewish colleagues to St. Petersburg. Jews, they said, were not members of the guild and did not have permits, and yet functions as smiths in the town, and quite competitively. The Russian administration usually protected a few Christian artisans in western provinces, and yet in this case it favored the Jews. The Russian administrators argued that since the Jews were smiths, they were already useful Jews and should be protected as such. The Governor-General of Kiev, Volhynia, and Polduov lulled Jewish smiths into Zhitomir to pay taxes as Christian guild members, and the Senate claimed they did not need certification as they learned their craft through experience. By the 1850s, the Russian administration had proved instrumental in creating a flourishing yet controlled Jewish community in Zhitomir, now largest in the region, triggering the demise of Berdichev. For Moscow Blank, the Zhitomir was a heaven. He found in Zhitomir what he had thought while defecting from his shtetl and imperial town, the embodiment of Russian power with its cheerful Russian Orthodox Church, loyal Russian state clerks. In Zhitomir, Moscow arranged for the secular education of his children. He befriended court clerks who helped him put on paper his denunciations against his fellow Jews, enlightened Jewish scribes who assisted him in articulating his proposals to the Russian Tsar, members of the Russian Orthodox clergy, and the local Russian military and state bureaucrats who helped him convert to Christianity. Moscow died in Zhitomir in his mid-90s, most likely in the house of his daughter. Having delved deeply into Moscow, Moscow Blank's urban context, one should take a glimpse into his life story to find out where the prophecy of Madame Finkelstein came true. Okay, thank you. That was chapter 1.